Have you ever stopped to think about how all of this began? The sky, the earth, the stars, and even you. How was all of this created? The answer seems simple, right? But what if I told you that the truth about how God created the world is much more surprising, and even shocking, than you imagine? Since childhood, we've heard the story of creation, but do we really know what happened? Maybe you've wondered, is there something more to this story? Something they never told you? Today, you will discover details that will completely change the way you see creation. Get ready for a journey that will not only answer your questions but also reveal the power and purpose behind everything. Shall we go together? Imagine, for a moment, an absolute silence. There was no sound, no light, no space, no time. It was an immense emptiness, like a blank canvas, waiting for something to come and fill it, shape it, give it form. Before any star shone, before the first grain of sand formed, and even before the wind began to blow, there was only one thing: God. In this initial moment, the universe was completely formless. There was none of what we see now: skies, mountains, seas, or trees. None of it existed. Only the vast and immense emptiness stretched everywhere. The earth was not even present, there was no night or day, not even the simplest particle of life. It was a state of pure expectation. And this is where it all begins. God, in his immensity, did not need space or time to exist. He is eternal, he always was, and always will be. His presence was all that existed, and he, with his creative power, was about to bring into existence everything we know and see today. This scene makes us reflect on the greatness of God. He does not depend on anything outside of himself. The universe did not make him, he made the universe. The formless void was not a mistake, but a preparation. God was about to speak, and in speaking, he would transform that absolute emptiness into a world full of life and beauty. It is in this space of silence and waiting that the story of creation begins. God, with his powerful word, would give shape to the chaos. And the first step would be a simple, yet astounding statement: let there be light. But before everything, even before the light was born, God already knew what he would do. The emptiness, the nothingness, was just the blank canvas where the divine masterpiece would be drawn. Creation was not something random or improvised. Every element, every star, every living being, everything was planned with unimaginable perfection. The beginning of everything, though simple and quiet, was about to become the greatest spectacle that ever existed. It's fascinating to think how everything came from nothing, from emptiness. This emptiness, which might seem like a desert of inactivity, was actually the fertile ground for creation. God, in his infinite wisdom, was about to show his masterpiece. And what seemed like a complete void, in an instant, would become home to billions of stars, planets, and, of course, humanity. The beginning of the world, then, was not an accident, nor a coincidence. It was an intentional act of God, from nothing. He was preparing to fill that emptiness with something magnificent, something only he could create. Can you imagine how the world was created? Don't forget to check if you're subscribed to the channel so you won't miss more videos like this one. Imagine a completely empty scene, formless, colorless, just a dark and silent abyss. There is no land, no sky, nothing but emptiness. This was the state of the world at the beginning of everything. But then, God, with his powerful and creative voice, spoke for the first time. He said, "Let there be light." The moment those words were spoken, something incredible happened. From the deep darkness, a radiant light began to emerge, illuminating everything around it. The light was not like any other light we know, but a pure, divine light that broke through the darkness as if a cloak of shadows was being lifted from the scene. Imagine the surprise, the impact of that light emerging from nothing. Suddenly, where there was only emptiness, now there was a vibrant light that illuminated everything. Chaos was being transformed into something purposeful and orderly. This light was not just a simple illumination but a separation from the darkness. God, in his infinite power, not only brought light to the world but also separated the light from the darkness. What was once mixed now became clear: light and darkness would be distinct. The day, with its light, would be separated from the night, with its shadows. At that moment, God established an order for the world. He separated day from night. What was once a vast emptiness without distinction now had structure. The light not only illuminated but brought the possibility of cycles: the day for work, activity, life, and the night for rest, sleep, silence. A dynamic that did not exist before began to emerge. God was taking the first step to organize what was once chaos. When we look at this first act of creation, we see more than just light being generated. We see God's action bringing order to the world, and that order reflects in every aspect of creation. The simple act of separating light from darkness was the beginning of everything. Day and night, the rhythms of the world, the course of time, it all began there, when God said, "Let there be light." And at the end of that first day, God looked at the light he had created and saw that it was good. The first thing he did, the first manifestation of his work, was good. There was no longer the chaos of before, but now there was light, clarity, and the promise that from that moment on, the world would be transformed. What began with the Word of God became something tangible and real, something that would bring life and meaning to all of creation. Imagine a scenario where everything is chaotic, where waters seem to be everywhere, covering the entire surface of the earth. There is no visible sky, just a vast blanket of water in every direction. It is in this absolute chaos that God, with his powerful voice, begins to shape the world. God looked at this scene and said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters." And, upon hearing his voice, the transformation began. God made the firmament, a space in the midst of the waters, and there he separated the waters above from the waters below. Can you imagine what happened next? The waters above seemed to rise to form a kind of sky, while the waters below separated to form seas and oceans. The firmament then became the sky we see today, a vast blue space filled with clouds and life. This act of separation was more than just a simple change in the scenery, it was the beginning of order in the universe. Until that moment, everything had been mixed together, but now there was distinction, organization. What had once been a heap of endless waters became something orderly, on one side, the sky, on the other, the waters of the earth. The sky was not just an empty space, but the dwelling place that would be filled with light, winds, and life that God would bring in the coming days. There, in the sky, something incredible was about to happen. And so, with a simple command, God gave the world the first glimpse of his greatness. He looked at what he had made and saw that it was good. At that moment, the sky already began to reflect divine perfection, even though it was just beginning to take shape. And the firmament that God had created, separating the waters, became a crucial milestone in the creation plan, giving the world the beginning of structure and life as we know it. Let's imagine for a moment the scene of the third day. The sky had been formed, and the waters were still spread out everywhere. The earth, in its entirety, was still covered by these chaotic waters, formless and lifeless. But God, with his powerful voice, looked at that sea of water and spoke once again. "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear." And at the exact moment God spoke, the waters began to move, as if obeying his command. They withdrew to the corners of the earth, and dry land finally appeared, revealing a surface ready for something new and wonderful. It was an impressive moment. No longer a vast ocean, but solid, firm land prepared to receive life. Each piece of soil seemed to breathe for the first time, with the promise that something grand was about to happen. And then, with his creative word, God gave the next command: "Let the earth bring forth plants, trees that bear fruit, and herbs that yield seeds, according to their kind." Like a painter adding the final touch to his masterpiece, God looked at the dry land and transformed it into a vibrant garden. Suddenly, the ground, once barren and empty, was filled with life. The earth, now green, began to sprout with an explosion of colors and shapes, fresh herbs, flowers of all kinds, and towering trees, bearing fruits with flavors unknown until then. It was as if the earth was responding to the divine call, revealing all its beauty and potential. The trees began to grow quickly, their roots deeply sinking into the soil, while their crowns reached upward toward the sky, as if they wanted to touch the stars. Some of them began to bear juicy fruits, while others produced seeds that would later spread across the land. The diversity of plants and trees was a testament to God's creative power, as everything was being created in an orderly and perfect manner. It wasn't just a physical creation, but also a sign of purpose. God was not only giving life to the earth, he was establishing a system where life could grow, multiply, and thrive. Each plant, each tree, with its unique shape and function in the ecosystem of the earth, represented God's care and wisdom, who knew exactly what needed to be done for the world to begin to flourish. And there, on the third day, the earth, which had once been disordered and empty, was now full of life and vibrant with color. The plants and fruit-bearing trees began to spread across the dry land, covering it with a layer of lush green. God looked at all this and, as he did on all the other days of his creation, declared that it was good. He had not only shaped the world, but now he had brought its beauty, harmony, and fullness to life. Each leaf, each flower, each tree was in perfect harmony with the nature around it. The blue sky seemed to stretch even further, and the waters, now confined to their borders, reflected this new order. It was the moment when the earth and life met, and the world, now more beautiful and vibrant, was ready to follow its course. God had made the earth fruitful, and the life, which had once been only in the heart of God, was now manifesting everywhere. On the fourth day of creation, God continued his magnificent work of transforming chaos into order. Until then, the world was still shapeless, the earth was lifeless, and the sky, which had once been empty, now took on a more defined form. And it was on this day that God did something astonishing, something that would give rhythm to time, a mark of his power and intelligence. God looked at the vast heavens and, with his powerful word, said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night. They will serve as signs to mark seasons, days, and years. Let there be light in the expanse to give light to the earth." And immediately, what had seemed to be an endless void was filled with the most incredible of all creations, the sun, the moon, and the stars. First, God created the sun, the largest and brightest of the lights. It was set to govern the day, bringing warmth, light, and life. The sun, with its intense glow, would illuminate the whole earth, driving away the darkness of night. Its light was not only visible but vital. Without it, life on earth could not exist. The sun's warmth would allow plants to grow, animals to live, and humans to see and walk. The sun was the visible representation of God's strength, seen by all, every day. But God did not stop there. At that very moment, he created the moon to govern the night. The moon, with its soft and mysterious light, would not compete with the sun's brightness but would be a reflection of it. It would illuminate the night sky, guiding travelers lost in darkness, providing some relief and beauty during the darkest hours. And God did this so perfectly that the moon, in its silent majesty, would become a sign of times and seasons, a natural clock for humanity. As if that weren't grand enough, God also created the stars. He scattered them across the sky as if adorning the heavens. Each star, with its own light, was placed there to beautify the sky, so that, at night, mankind would look up and marvel at the creation. The stars were not just points of light but symbols of greatness and mystery. They remind us of how vast the sky is and how much greater the Creator is. With his infinite wisdom, God set all of this into motion. The sun, the moon, and the stars began to follow their orbits, marking the rhythm of the earth. And it was then that day and night began to exist in an orderly fashion, with the seasons, the days of the week, and the months, all perfectly adjusted by God's power. At the end of this day, God looked at all he had created and saw that it was good. He had not only brought light to the earth but had also created a perfect system that still governs life on earth today. The stars continue to shine in the sky, the sun follows its journey across the sky every day, and the moon lights up the nights. Each of these lights is proof of how the Creator planned and executed his creation to perfection. It was the fifth day of creation, and the universe was coming to life at a rapid pace. After the separation of the waters and the formation of the land, God looked at the vast seas and the wide sky and decided that it was time to fill these spaces with life. The Creator, with his powerful word, made something extraordinary happen. He spoke, and life emerged. God first turned to the waters. He said, "Let the waters be filled with living creatures." And immediately, the seas began to stir, and creatures of all shapes and sizes started to appear. There were brightly colored fish swimming in every corner, from the simplest to the most complex, with fins and tails that moved agilely through the deep waters. The ocean, once empty and silent, was now filled with an immense variety of life. But it didn't stop there. God, in his infinite wisdom, also created the enormous sea monsters, creatures of impressive proportions that ruled the depths of the seas. He thought of the small fish swimming in schools and the great whales, which now traveled majestically through vast oceans. And all these creatures were there, fulfilling the role God had given them, to live, grow, and multiply. Next, God turned to the sky. He said, "Let the sky be filled with birds." And suddenly, the birds began to fly, cutting through the air with their wings. God created a vast variety of birds, from the tiny hummingbirds fluttering from flower to the majestic eagles soaring high. Some birds flew in flocks, others, alone, traveled great distances, crossing continents and oceans. The sky, once silent, was now filled with life. The sound of birds singing and flapping their wings filled the air, a perfect music that could only come from the Creator. God blessed all these creatures, both those living in the sea and those flying in the sky. He said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply." And so, life in the seas and skies continued to grow. The aquatic creatures and birds began to spread everywhere, as a reflection of the divine plan to fill the earth with life. The beauty of this creation was not just the diversity of forms and colors, but the perfect balance that God had established. Each being, whether in the sea or the sky, had its role in the grand plan of creation. The sea was now full of life, and the sky, once empty and silent, echoed with the sound of wings and bird songs. God had created a vibrant world full of wonders, where life was just beginning to bloom. And so, the fifth day of creation came to an end. God looked at what he had made and saw that it was good. He had given life to the seas and the skies, filling them with amazing creatures, all interconnected by his perfect plan. Every fish, every bird, was an expression of God's power and wisdom, and the world was becoming an even more wonderful place. The creation was far from finished, but this day was a milestone, for now the sky and the sea were alive, full of movement and color, reflecting the beauty of the Creator. We have reached the sixth day, a day that would be crucial, not only for the creation of the world but also for the purpose of all creation. God, in His infinite wisdom, reserved this day to complete His work by creating the living beings that would inhabit the earth. Imagine the scene, the sun rising over a land already shaped, the majestic mountains, and the rivers flowing with life. The earth, now ready, awaited its inhabitants. God looked at His creation and said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, wild animals, and creatures that crawl on the ground." God began to call into existence a multitude of creatures, each with a unique function, reflecting His greatness. First, He created the land animals, lions, elephants, zebras, bears, and even those that seemed so simple, like ants and rabbits. Each animal, with its unique beauty, took shape, and the earth was filled with sounds and movement. The roar of the lion echoed across the plains, while the birds flew above, filling the sky with their colors and songs. But God did not stop there. He looked at His creation and knew that something more needed to be done. The creation of wild and domestic animals had been a spectacle, but there was still one last masterpiece to be created. And then, God decided to create the most important being of all. The one who would be the crown of His creation. Man and woman. Unlike any other created being, they were not made from the dust of the earth but in the image and likeness of God. God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." This was the moment for an even more extraordinary creation. God formed man from the dust of the ground, shaping every part of his body with divine skill, breathing life into him through a breath of his own spirit. Man, Adam, woke up to a perfect world, surrounded by fruit trees and with the responsibility to take care of all that God had created. He was not alone, for God knew that something more was needed, someone with whom he could share this paradise. Then, God caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep, and from his rib, he formed the woman, Eve. When Adam woke up and saw Eve by his side, he was enchanted and said, "This is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." The woman, with her grace and beauty, completed the man, and together, they were the image of God on earth. God looked at all His creation, the animals, the earth, the man, and the woman, and saw that it was all very good, as He had planned. He blessed them and gave them a mandate: "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." They had dominion over the world, and their mission was to care for it and govern with wisdom. God then looked upon His work and rejoiced, for it was all very good. On the sixth day, the earth was not only a place inhabited, but a home for humanity, where life flourished abundantly. Adam and Eve, created in the image and likeness of God, had the honor of being responsible for caring for this marvelous creation. This moment, on the sixth day, was the climax of creation, where humanity received its place of honor, being made in the image of the Creator Himself, and gaining the responsibility to rule and protect the entire earth, reflecting God's love and wisdom in their stewardship. Creation was complete, but the cycle of creation was not yet finished. On the next day, rest would come, but at that moment, the earth was alive, full of wonders, and man, with woman by his side, was ready to fulfill his role given by God. After creating man and woman, God looked at His creatures and blessed them in a special way, giving them a grand and sacred purpose. Life in the Garden of Eden was perfect. Everything around them was in harmony, the soil was fertile, the rivers flowed with crystal-clear water, the trees bore abundant fruit, and the animals walked alongside Adam and Eve in peace. God, looking at all of this, knew that this state of beauty and perfection was not just to be admired, but should be carefully preserved and multiplied. It was then that God spoke to Adam and Eve, saying, "Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Genesis 1 verse 28. These words were not just a blessing, but also a divine command. God was giving them the responsibility to care for what He had created. This was the first great mission given to humanity, to be the guardian and caretaker of creation. He not only blessed them with the ability to have children and fill the earth, but also tasked them with something very important: maintaining the balance and order of the world. God trusted Adam and Eve to care for everything He had made, as responsible stewards, with the wisdom only He could offer. Let us imagine for a moment the impact of these words. It was not just an order, but a divine invitation to actively participate in creation. Adam and Eve were being invited to reflect God's creative character. They were now co-creators, entrusted with cultivating and making the earth prosper, making it bear fruit and remain abundant for all future generations. God had placed them in a perfect garden, free of hunger, disease, and evil. But this garden, this rich land, depended on their care. They were the guardians of this wonderful creation, responsible for ensuring that the harmony and beauty that God had established would endure. They were to plant, cultivate, protect the plants and animals, and at the same time, live in full communion with the Creator. God's blessing for Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply was not only about having children, but also about the flourishing of all creation. They were to care for the garden, ensuring that everything continued to grow and prosper, and in doing so, reflect the generosity of God, who not only creates but also sustains. Moreover, God did something else. He gave humanity dominion not to destroy or exploit irresponsibly, but to govern with wisdom and love. Adam and Eve had the ability to name the animals, as if they were the administrators of the earth. By naming the animals, they were not only identifying their characteristics but also demonstrating authority over them, as God's representatives on earth. This divine mandate still resonates today. God called humanity to be a partner in His creative work. Even though we live in a world that is often far from the perfection that God created, the principle remains: we are called to care for what God has entrusted to us, to care for the earth, nature, and one another. The responsibility of being a good steward of creation reflects our relationship with the Creator. Therefore, this mandate from God to Adam and Eve was not just a simple command, but a great responsibility, an honor, and an expression of the intimate relationship that God wanted to have with humanity. They had the ability to create and preserve, to multiply and care. And with that, God placed them as co-participants in His grand work. When the sixth day came to an end, creation was complete. God had made the heavens and the earth, the plants and the animals, and finally, He created man and woman in His image. Every part of creation, from the farthest planet to the smallest flower, was perfect and functioning as it should. The world, now filled with life and harmony, reflected God's grandeur and power. The work was finished. But something surprising happened on the seventh day. God, who had spoken light and stars into existence, who had shaped the seas and the mountains, and who had formed humankind with His own hands, did something that might seem unexpected: He rested. Now, let us not think that God was tired, for He is the creator of the entire universe and, as such, is immeasurably powerful. God's rest was not a physical rest but a rest of completion. He looked at everything He had made and saw that it was good, very good. The rest was, in fact, a pause to contemplate the perfection of His work, to savor what had been done. It was like an artist, after completing their masterpiece, stepping back for a moment to admire their creation, feeling satisfaction in a job well done. But God's rest on the seventh day was not just a moment of personal appreciation. It was also an act of sanctification. By resting, God blessed the seventh day, making it different from the others. He set this day apart to be special, a day dedicated to rest, contemplation, and communion. This was not just a physical rest, it was an invitation for all creation, especially humanity, to follow God's example and also enjoy a time of rest. God sanctified the seventh day, making it a day of rest for everyone. It was not just any weekend, it was a sacred time, a time to slow down, to reconnect with the Creator and with creation. This was the pattern set from the beginning. After working, man should set aside time to rest and remember that his life and purpose were intertwined with the Creator Himself. This rest, however, was not something mechanically imposed but was designed for the good of humanity. God knew that the fast and relentless pace of daily life could lead to exhaustion, anxiety, and even forgetting the greater purpose. Rest was not just for the body but for the soul. It was an invitation for humanity to stop and reflect on the beauty of the world God had created, to care for oneself, and to live in harmony with the divine plan. Imagine a place where the beauty is so perfect that it seems flawless, where peace reigns in every corner and the air is fresh and pure, with no imperfections. This place was not just any garden. It was the Garden of Eden, the perfect home created by God, where life flourished so fully that humans had never experienced anything like it before. God, with His incomparable wisdom and love, planted this garden in the heart of the earth. He not only made it beautiful, but He filled it with everything Adam and Eve could ever desire. The trees were loaded with juicy, delicious fruits, with vibrant colors that shone under the sun, reflecting the glory of the Creator. Each tree was a testament to God's generosity, offering not only food but pleasure to the eyes and the taste. Among these trees were those that produced various fruits, such as apples, figs, dates, and even the mysterious fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which, curiously, God had asked Adam and Eve not to eat. The waters were also present in abundance. God made rivers that flowed tranquilly, nourishing the garden and bringing life to everything they touched. These clear and abundant waters fed the land, keeping the soil fertile, where flowers and plants grew in an incredible diversity. The sound of the flowing rivers created a gentle melody, which seemed to sing the glory of God and brought a sense of serenity that could never be disturbed. It was a place where tranquility reigned, without the slightest shadow of chaos or suffering. But what really made the Garden of Eden special wasn't just its fruit trees or its abundant rivers. It was the fact that in this place, Adam and Eve had a unique connection with God. They didn't need anything else, for they were in total harmony with creation and the Creator. God walked through the garden, talked to them, and shared moments of pure intimacy. There was no separation between man and God. Their relationship was direct, without obstacles, without mediators. It was as if the very environment, with its perfection, was an extension of God's heart. Adam, the first man, cared for the garden, working with love and dedication, naming the animals and tending to every plant. Eve, made from Adam's rib, was his companion, an equal partner with whom he shared every moment of joy and peace. Together, they were the image and likeness of God, and their life in Eden was a full life, full of purpose and joy. It was a place where nature didn't just exist, but flourished in all its perfection. Adam and Eve's relationship with the world around them was one of care, respect, and gratitude. There was no sickness, no pain, no need to fight for survival. Everything they needed was right there within reach, and the sense of security and contentment was complete. But there was one rule. A simple yet important rule given by God: not to eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. This was done to preserve the balance and harmony of the garden, so that the relationship between man and God remained intact. Everything else was allowed, but that tree represented the boundary, the choice to trust or not trust God. It was the only place where man would have the freedom to choose to disobey God, but, until then, this choice had not been made. Life in Eden was like a dream, where there were no unmet needs, no unsatisfied desires. Man and woman lived in peace with themselves, with nature, and with God. It was the perfect home, the place God had prepared for His children, so they could live in harmony, love, and fullness, and experience the happiness that only He can offer. In the heart of the Garden of Eden, where everything was perfect, God placed a very special tree. It was not like the other trees, whose fruits could be eaten freely. This tree, called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, had a unique purpose. It stood there, at the center of everything, as a symbol of the freedom God gave to man, but also of the responsibility that came with that freedom. God, in His infinite wisdom, made everything in an orderly and beautiful way. The trees were laden with delicious fruits, the rivers flowed with crystal-clear waters, and the garden was full of life, harmony, and peace. Adam and Eve had everything they needed to live, prosper, and enjoy God's creation. They were immersed in God's love and in a perfect relationship with Him and with each other. But then, God placed a single restriction, a clear command. Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Genesis 2 verses 16 to 17. This was the only rule God gave to Adam and Eve. Everything else was theirs to enjoy, but that tree was different. It represented the choice God gave to man, free will. What was at stake was not the tree itself, but the meaning of disobeying God. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil was a test, not of food, but of trust and obedience. God, who created everything with such love and care, wanted man to live in harmony with Him, making the right choices, living according to His will, without the need to know evil. Good was already present, but evil would only enter the story if man chose to disobey. Adam and Eve were surrounded by wonders, but the tree of the knowledge of good and evil remained there, with its forbidden fruit, as a constant reminder of the freedom of choice. They had the freedom to decide, but that freedom came with the responsibility to follow what God had instructed. The garden was paradise, but their future was conditioned to one choice. And, as we will see, this tree, though just a simple point in Eden, represented the gateway to a new reality that could change everything. What seemed like a simple instruction would become the ultimate test of Adam and Eve's trust in God and His goodness. Though they didn't know it at the time, the tree was about to become the center of a story that would change the destiny of all humanity. Their choice would be more than just a simple act, it would be a decision that would echo through generations, affecting not only them but all their descendants. But for now, the tree stood as a silent reminder, and peace reigned in Eden. Until the day the choice had to be made. The story of the creation of man and woman is far from being a simple sequence of events, it is a profound narrative about purpose, unity, and the beauty of human relationships. When God created Adam, He placed man in a perfect world, with everything he needed to live. However, as He looked at Adam, God realized something was missing. He, the Creator, knew that man should not be alone. There was indeed beauty in all of creation, but man needed something more, someone with whom he could share his life, his joys, and even his responsibilities. God, in all His wisdom, saw that it would not be good for man to be alone. He had created the animals, with their different species and forms of life, but none of these creatures was suitable to be Adam's companion. They were all different, created to fill their own roles in the natural world, but none of them could connect with Adam in the way he needed. So, God decided to act in a unique and special way. He caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep. Imagine that for a moment, Adam, in God's rest, completely unaware of what was about to happen. God, the creator of all, with divine hands, took one of Adam's ribs. Not only did he take a rib, but he made this a significant moment, because what he was about to create would be a direct extension of Adam, a part of his being. God shaped Adam's rib with the same care and perfection with which he had created man, but this time, he did something even more remarkable. Unlike Adam, who had been created from the dust of the earth, Eve was formed from a part of Adam, symbolizing the depth and intimacy that God had planned for their relationship. Eve would be a companion, not a servant or subordinate. She would be an equal, made of the same substance, with a mind, heart, and spirit to live alongside Adam, sharing the life God had given them. When Adam woke up, he was filled with wonder. He saw Eve, this woman, and for the first time in the history of creation, he experienced a true connection. There was no more loneliness, no more lack. He saw her as part of himself, someone he could call my flesh and bone. He exclaimed with joy, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man." Genesis 2 verse 23. Eve was not a separate creature, but a continuation of God's creation, made to be the perfect partner for Adam. Together, Adam and Eve represented the first divine union, a relationship designed to reflect the image of God, who is love and communion. God did not make them to live in solitude, but to support each other, grow together, and fulfill the mission of caring for the earth and multiplying. And so, with the creation of Eve, God not only formed the first woman, but also established the first perfect human relationship, a covenant of love, companionship, and partnership. Together, Adam and Eve would be a reflection of divine unity, called to share a life of harmony and beauty in God's creation. They were not made to be separate beings, but to live in a union that expressed God's desire to be in relationship with his children. Adam, then, as he looked at Eve, saw the woman as the perfect complement, a being created to stand by his side, to complete what was missing in his life, and to walk with him in a newly created world. Together, they formed the beginning of a new story, a story of love, connection, and the life that God had planned for humanity. When God decided to create the world, he was not merely forming a land to be inhabited. His creation had a much greater purpose. It was an expression of his own glory, a reflection of his incomparable majesty and power. Every mountain, every tree, every animal, everything had been made to bear witness to God's power and beauty. When we look at nature around us, we see more than just a simple physical creation. We see the hand of a divine creator who is good, just, and full of love. The world was not just a place to dwell, but a grand setting that displayed the magnificence of God. God, in his infinite wisdom, did not create everything randomly. He made everything to have order and purpose. The sky and the earth, the seas and dry land, the plants and the animals, everything was carefully planned, with each part having a role to play in the harmony of the whole. The creation was not chaotic, but a divine masterpiece where every element reflected an aspect of God's character, his perfection, his love, and his desire for communion with his creatures. But the pinnacle of his creation was man and woman, Adam and Eve. God created them in his own image and likeness, not only as rational and intelligent beings but as those who could have an intimate relationship with him. They were not made to live apart from God but to enjoy his presence, to talk with him, to walk with him in the Garden of Eden. God's purpose was clear. He wanted to be close to his creatures, desiring a deep and meaningful relationship with them. Humankind, created with the ability to love and choose, had the opportunity to live in perfect harmony with the Creator, to reflect his goodness, and to walk in his light. This relationship with God was meant to be something natural and wonderful, without barriers or separation. Adam and Eve could live in complete freedom, without fear, without guilt, and without the pain that sin would bring. The Garden of Eden was the perfect place, where God's presence was constant, and where peace reigned in every aspect of life. Humanity was made to know and reflect God's love, to live in communion with him, and to care for his creation with respect and reverence. God's purpose was not just to create an inhabitable world, but to create a world where the relationship with him would be the true reason for human existence. However, this harmony and relationship with God depended on something fundamental: choice. God did not want to create robots, but free beings, capable of loving and worshiping him willingly. The creation of a true relationship could not be forced, it had to be genuine. And this would be the great purpose of creation. God desired that humanity, when looking at the world around them, would see the beauty of his creation and, at the same time, experience the Creator's unconditional love. Therefore, the purpose of creation was more than just a physical environment, it was a call to communion, friendship, and love. Every aspect of creation was designed to invite humanity to know God more deeply, to live in harmony with Him and with each other, and to care for the world responsibly. God not only created the world, but He established an eternal invitation for humanity to walk with Him, in perfect harmony, reflecting His glory and living in His love. This was God's plan from the beginning, and He knew that by creating man, He was offering him the opportunity to experience the greatest of all blessings, to be near to Him, now and forever. When God created the world, He had a perfect plan. Every detail, every movement, and every word He spoke had a purpose. Over the course of 6 days, He shaped the heavens, the earth, the seas, the animals, and finally, man and woman. On each of these days, God looked at what He had made and declared that it was good. And God saw that it was good. This was His judgment, a sign that everything was in accordance with His plan. But what does good mean to God? It is not merely a superficial quality, like something pleasant to the eyes. For God, good means that everything was in harmony, complete, and perfect. He didn't do anything by chance or carelessly. Every element of creation was in perfect tune, like a symphony where every note has its place and function. The sky was separated from the earth, the waters from the seas, the light illuminated the day, and the darkness kept the night. And in the end, everything connected, forming the great and beautiful picture of creation. Now, on the 6th day, when God made man and woman in His image and likeness, He looked at all of creation and said that it was very good. And God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good. It wasn't just good as before, but something beyond, something complete, where the perfection of His plan was manifested. When God looked at Adam and Eve in His image, living in harmony with creation, in tune with Him, He knew that everything was in its rightful place. Humanity was ready to care for the earth, to multiply, and to live in communion with the Creator. God looked at the world He had formed, and in His heart, He felt a deep satisfaction. He knew He had made something incredible. Something that reflected His power, His wisdom, and most importantly, His goodness. Everything was perfect, not only in the physical aspect but in the purpose and intention God had for creation. There were no flaws, no imperfections. The beauty and order He had established were clear to Him, and He had no doubt as He looked at it all, it was very good. This declaration that everything was very good also reminds us of something profound. God's creation was not only good in itself but also good for us, human beings. The world was made for us to live in fullness and in communion with the Creator. The garden was the perfect home, with food in abundance, an environment of peace and rest, and a direct relationship with God, without the barrier of sin. Adam and Eve, made in God's image, were meant to live in harmony with everything around them. Now, we can imagine the scene. The sun was shining gently, the trees were blooming, the rivers ran with crystal clear water, and all living beings, from the animals walking on the earth to the birds flying in the sky, were fulfilling their purpose. Humanity, in the person of Adam and Eve, was surrounded by all that was good and perfect. Everything was ready to be enjoyed, everything was prepared for the life God had planned. And so, with that look of satisfaction, God finished His work. He withdrew from the work of creation, but what He left behind was a masterpiece reflecting His greatness. The world, in its entirety, was a reflection of His character. As He contemplated all that He had made, He experienced the pleasure of seeing His will fulfilled in the fullness of creation. And here's the most surprising part: God didn't need to rest because He was tired. He is all-powerful. He rested because the work was complete, and by resting, He left us an example. An example that after work, there should be a time of rest, reflection, and appreciation. God not only saw that it was good, but He wanted us, human beings, to also see and enjoy the goodness of what He had created. God, with His loving and careful gaze, gave us a perfect earth, a world without guilt, without suffering, where He could walk with men and have communion with them. He completed His work and declared with certainty, "It was very good." This is the beginning of a story of love and relationship. Creation wasn't just a task of building something, but of creating a space where humanity could live in harmony with God, with nature, and with each other. It was a beginning that carried the promise of something grand, something that, over time, would be deeply tested, but that in its heart would continue to reflect the perfection of its Creator. And so, the work was complete, but God's plan was just beginning. The story of humanity, which started in the Garden of Eden, was marked by God's deep love, who created a perfect world but knew that man's choice to walk with Him would be an essential part of His plan for the future.